I got saved at the age of 22 years old, man, and I was rough. And Pastor GJ Hernandez was the one that kind of brought me under his wing. He was a Bible study leader and usher disciple at that time. You know, getting pretty much getting ready to go and preach the gospel. I had no idea. I was newly saved, and I was just loving life in Jesus. You know, just happy at the fact that I didn't have to, dive into alcohol in order to feel whole, or do drugs in order to feel, like I belong somewhere. And but I was really really rough around the edges, and so I used to argue with people a lot. I was a very confrontational individual. That's how I was in the world, and when I first got saved, that's how I was in salvation. I was ready to argue with somebody, and although I didn't know the Bible, I was ready to defend, the way that I would go hard for something else in the world. That's the same way that I was ready to go hard for Jesus Christ, and it was a true conversion that happened. And I took it personal whenever someone said something about, the church or Jesus Christ. I'd rise up, and the New York in me would come out real quick. I start cocking my head sideways, clapping my hands as I'm talking. I'll start getting loud and live, and that's the New York thing. And so, but what I realize is that none of that ever won anyone over. The only time that I would really be able to penetrate the walls of the person that I'm talking to was when I bring it back to the cross. When I bring it back to the cross, and that's something that GJ told me. He goes, Ernie, just you know what? At the end of the day, what what no one can refute is what Jesus Christ has done in your life. Just bring it back to the cross. Bring it back to what God delivered you from, what He saved you from. And because that might relate, that might be the very thing that that person is going through right now. And so, like I mentioned, I was an alcoholic, and I used to dive into the bottle. There was a lot of things that I used to do that God ended up breaking those chains, and I ended up finding fulfillment in God. And so I began to speak on those things, and I would see myself being able to connect with complete strangers a lot more when I talk about, my failings, and the things that I used to give myself into, and bringing it back to the cross on how Jesus delivered me.